is there a consensus growing with regards to a value creation playbook that seems to work, or is it very idiosyncratic still?
Well, I've got a massive bias on this. So I've got like Jim's version of what it should look like, and it's only one version. And this comes back to the sort of inner Scottish accountant, control freak, turned management consultant that I am. So, that. And the way that I tend to look at these things, and I think you see some of this in the industry, is what's happened is the general partners have got much more focused in what they look at. So they've gone from being more, I'd say, much more thematic as opposed to just purely deal driven. So they're generally, I think, much more thoughtful about where they want to play. And they want to play in areas where they feel like they understand the secular drivers of what's going to define success in a certain little subsector, be that what it may, like lab testing or SaaS software is another one which is out there. And what they do is they say, okay, let's look at this area and see why it makes sense for us. So, what's driving it? So are the sort of fundamental drivers of demand which are strong and have a real resiliency for whatever reason. So if it's a business critical need, or it's it's something to do with a demographic which is going in one direction only, then these things are all helpful because it gives some sort of resiliency underlying. And then I think they like to understand the sort of industry dynamics. So what's the fragmentation of the industry? Because again, we'll come back to why that's important. And then also how is it defined? So is it, like bricks? If you buy a brick company, bricks are like the most local business in the world because bricks don't cost much and don't travel very far. So that's a local business. Software is a global business because it travels infinitely at the click of a button. So the kind of business definitions frames the size of the prize to some extent, and that also weaves into the strategy. So, I think what you see them doing, the good GPs doing, and certainly the ones that I seem to sort of have a bias towards, are they're pretty good at articulating what these different things look like, and it gives them a sort of great reference point to begin the journey. Because, the what flying on one engine is probably a slightly unfortunate analogy, but that ability to sort of do the business transformation is I think pretty important, and they do need to understand that the point of departure is a consulting-ese version of what that means. It's like the starting point, but then fundamentally you've got to know the point of arrival, which is where you're going to get to. And that means, knowledge, you have to have a sort of fundamental understanding of where you're beginning, but you've got to have a really good sense of how you're going to get from A to B. And that's the transformation bit. And again, that really plays into this notion of playbooks, which is simply how many ways to win. So how many ways have we got to get from A to B? And how many times have we done it? So how much of it is a repeatable model? Because it's sort of human nature that if you've done something 10 times before, the 11th time you're going to be pretty good at it. If you've only done it once, or indeed if you've never done it before, then it's a bit of a different prospect, isn't it? So where these repeatable models are sort of most applicable, generally the outcomes are better from a risk-adjusted perspective. So, and again, with a little Venn diagram of these two different things crosses, then that's your sweet spot. So we pretty much know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and we've figured out the industry dynamics and the definition and the way it's constructed as a market and our point of entry, like our attachment point. We figured all that out. Oh, and by the way, we figured out how to get from A to B, and ideally we've done it before. So when the game starts, we're ready to go, right? We've been practicing for a while, and that's my big bias. But that to me just feels like a much better way to do it. It's not the only way, but I think you see a sort of growing prevalence of bits of that. Not everybody's got the same approach, everyone's got the same toolkit, but this idea around we better be much more thoughtful about what we're doing to begin with is certainly out there, and I think it's because of what the pricing environment means. That the entry point, or the height of the board that you're jumping off when you take your dive is twice as high. So you better know what you're doing, or else you're going to belly flop horribly, and that's going to be painful.